Hello, everyone. We're going to wait just another minute or two, see if anybody else is going to join us. We had about 10 people signed up for today, so if that's okay, we're just going to give it a minute. Are there any questions that you guys may want to ask before we start?
Over audio or via the chat?
You can just speak openly right now. We're just waiting for other people to join.
Yeah, I just wanted to check when you were going to go over the application form that you had prepared.
I'm sorry, what?
When you were going to go over the application form that you had prepared for the PPP.
So with the new changes, we had planned to roll those out last week. With the new changes, we're going to be updating them. So I can probably get those out next week.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I hadn't missed it.
Yes, no.
Yvonne, too, the SBA is working on a new application, so we didn't want to, as you all have seen, that application that they presented was quite daunting. And we anticipate that they're going to make major changes to that, which I'm going to discuss. So we didn't want to, jump the gun and have you all worry about things that might not need to worry about.
Sounds great.
So, hi, Melinda, it's Christine.
Hi.
Hi, Joe. So I'm not, so my stuff is due, my window, my original 8 weeks closes on Tuesday. And so I have all my stuff ready, but I was starting to fill out the application. Are you suggesting just wait and?
So have you spent all the money? You have. Then I would do it.
But like my bank, like I went to my bank and they're not like accepting forgiveness.
They're not ready. Okay. So, that's interesting.
Because you do have the option to retain your 8-week window rather than the 24. And we'll touch upon that later, but.
So
and I don't want to take it up now, but yeah, so I'm ready.
Yeah, so on Tuesday, what I would do, I would send an email to the bank and let them know that you want to stick with the 8-week period. Okay. And you want to start the forgiveness process. Okay. And see what they say. Which bank are you with?
TD Bank.
Okay. And if you need our help in any way, let me know. But I would encourage anybody who has used the funds and is confident that they're going to be forgiven, get it done and over with, because when more money comes out, you'll be in line.
Yeah. So so my question is, I may take this offline with you or Joe. I was doing my FTEs because all of our guys are part-time. No one is 40 hours. And I just want to make sure that I may ask you offline a question about if I'm doing it correctly.
Sure.
Of course.
Okay. So maybe I have a little spreadsheet I've made, and if we can just spend 10 seconds and go over it, I just want to make sure I do it correctly. So.
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. So we are going to go get started. I do have a full schedule today, so I can't unfortunately wait too much longer. So gonna let Joe take over.
So hello everyone. So we have some updates from Capitol Hill. As Melinda will discuss, she spoke with some senators and representatives and their staffs yesterday, along with a new set of interim final rules. And yes, I know we've already had at least 9 of those come out, but we're going to have some more. So let's go over some of the changes. Today we're going to start off, Melinda's going to talk about her time. She met with Senators Warren and Markey and Representatives Clark and Moulton. And then I'm going to go through some of the interim final rule changes, specifically talking about how they're changed June 30th to December 31st, what the new maturity periods are, deferment and application periods, spending requirements, and the new covered period, and then we're going to wrap it up with some questions.
Okay, so yesterday was a long day. This was 7 weeks in the making. Every morning at 8 a.m. I'm part of a team of entrepreneurs or small businesses across the country that meet with various political people and Washington people and staffers and SBA, and we've had a voice for quite some time, and it was building up to our time in front of the Massachusetts politicians, if you will. So I have to say, overall, I'm a bit disappointed. And if any of you know me, you know that I'm pretty demanding in what I seek to accomplish, and I feel like you know, from a political standpoint, they were politicians for sure. So there is some good news coming our way. I think their focus is, and every one of them said this, that, you know, their focus is getting a handle on the pandemic, which they're not certain in the status of that. And, you know, if the pandemic is still among us, then there's not much we can do to help the economic front. So they were pretty clear about that. They did say that, you know, given the fact that, you know, the pandemic is not in control and could come back, COVID could come back in the fall, that they don't believe there's any way around more funding coming our way. And they didn't have much by the way of what that would look like. But would it be more additional PPP funding? You know, what would that look like? And so, you know, that was a bit frustrating because, as you know, the PPP funding, most have received it. There's still quite a bit of money left in that bucket, but a lot of businesses aren't going for it because they were nervous. They didn't want to take on any more debt, and the fact that it couldn't or had a potential to be unforgiven wasn't something they wanted to engage in. So what we basically did was I had 7 minutes with each of them, and I gave my spiel. And one of the things I found frustrating is, and I said to them all, was that you know, the PPP, really what it turned into was unemployment being administered by small businesses, because many businesses are still not operational and they're paying their people. So it was frustrating, you know, as a business owner and an advisor of many small businesses, that you know, those funds really were not doing anything to improve the likelihood that these businesses will be around in 6 months, 3 months, whatever that might be. We also discussed the problem with unemployment, that there are, you know, many people who do not want to return to work because their unemployment benefits are, you know, much more than they would make if they were working. Quite frankly, in some cases, it's double. So, you know, I think they're not thinking of the long-term implications, you know, that income is taxable, and you know, they're taking themselves out of the work pool, and, you know, all of that. You know, everybody's focusing on, you know, surviving, and unfortunately, that's the landscape that's out there. There's also a lot of unemployment fraud going on. So if any of you haven't been exposed to it or haven't heard about it, many of our clients have received letters from unemployment saying that, you know, your unemployment is on its way, and they didn't apply for unemployment. So there's a tremendous amount of fraud out there. So I say, you know, be careful. And when you call unemployment now, that's their first message is, you know, we understand that, you know, there's a lot of fraud out there. That's the other thing we talked about, is how little, you know, guidance there is from these government agencies when you do have a question or you do have a concern. You know, you can't get any answers. And, you know, we received all of their private email messages, but I've said to them, I've been reaching out to all of you for months, and I get a return email saying, we are overwhelmed, and we will get back to you. Well, it's been 2 months and I haven't heard from anyone. So they assured us that they were, you know, building up their staff so that they could, you know, be more available to their constituents. The other thing that's going on in unemployment is college students are applying for unemployment. So a college student that's home for the summer who had, you know, a part-time minimum wage job and probably made $3,000 last summer is applying for unemployment, and in many cases got retro pay back to March 1st, and many of them to April 1st, in which some of these kids got checks for $5,000 and $6,000, and now they're collecting $700 a week. So what these college kids don't know is that when you go through the pandemic unemployment and you click the box that says I agree, what you're agreeing to is a long list of things that none of them would be allowed to collect unemployment based on those conditions. So it's fraud. And it might take a year, it might take 2 years. One of the staffers actually at Markey's office said that he just got a notice when he prepared his taxes this year for a balance he owed unemployment from 10 years ago, and they took it from his refund. So this will not go away. This will come back to bite them. So if you have any college students that you know of, in many cases, these kids did it on their own because their friends told them about it and the parents don't even know they did it. You should let them know that they should make accommodations to return that money because they are not qualified to be collecting unemployment. The money that's out there to assist us all, whether we're individuals operating a household or business owners, this money is meant to fill a hole or a gap that you couldn't otherwise fill. It's not free money. And the government officials are now starting to realize some of the holes in the issues with some of the pandemic assistance that's out there and what it has done. So I do not believe that the $600 extra a week will continue past July 25th. If there's a new round of PPP funding or whatever funding that will be, it will be strictly limited to those businesses who have seen a significant reduction in revenue. So in other words, here we are in June. If last June your revenue was $100,000, in this June it was only $40,000, well, that's a significant reduction in your business. And if your expenses remain the same, then you have an issue, right? So those are the businesses that are going to be receiving the funding. And they said that they were going to explicitly spell out the terms going forward. So, you know, the message we took away from that was, you know, try to pivot, try to innovate, try to do what you can to create opportunities for your business, get creative to earn revenue, because the funding is going to be limited as we move forward. So I think that sort of wraps up everything we heard yesterday. Again, although I was hoping that it would be more definitive, nonetheless, that's where we are, and we'll continue to keep you updated as that information comes forward. And they also did recognize that the application for forgiveness was crazy, and that none of them agreed with that the process for forgiveness should be very, very, very streamlined, and that the banks should have a great deal of flexibility in getting that accomplished. they did recognize that, you know, for many of us, that forgivable loan looked like it was an unforgivable loan. And now they've corrected that, and it does appear that, you know, everybody's loan, you know, should be forgiven based on the original parameters. Thank you. Turn it over to Joe. He's got some good stuff for you.
So the first major change with the new interim final rules was a date change. So in the original text of the loan, June 30th was the end-all be-all, most important date. Mattered for your covered period, mattered for your FTE reduction calculations. It also actually was the ending date for your loan. So some loans, if you applied on June 1st, it was how it was written into the CARES Act was your loan expires the sooner of 8 weeks or June 30th. With the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act, they've actually pushed this date back to December 31st. So it's giving people more time to restore FTEs back to their original amount. And it's also that the covered period now will extend past June 30th. And for many of you, go towards about October. So now the new end covered period is December 31st. That's a little more than 6 months away now. So everybody should get their full 24 weeks in. Also, any new loans that are going to be made under the PPP, if you've been on the fence, you haven't applied yet, you need to get those applications in by June 30th. As Melinda said, there's about $130 billion left in the pot for people to make to get PPP loans. So if you have been on the fence, apply now, get those applications in. June 30th is the last day they'll be accepting those. And that's still for even with the PPP Flexibility Act. So the next major change is the maturity period. So loans made on or after June 5th will have a maturity of 5 years. So if you have a PPP from before June 5th, which many of you do, you have a 2-year maturity period with some deferment. So what they said was, because they recognized that now if you waited, you know, if you had waited a week, you would have had 3 extra years to pay this money back. Lenders and borrowers can mutually agree to extend the maturity. So if you reach out to your bank and they say, yep, that's fine, you get an extra 3 years to pay back the money if it's not forgiven. As Melinda mentioned earlier, many of these loans are now going to be forgiven. If you think about it, the loan was 2.5 times your payroll. So now that we're having 24 weeks to spend this, many of you will have it entirely forgiven. So stay tuned though, because this may also change. Technically in the CARES Act, what Congress did is they wrote a maturity period of up to 10 years. In the interim final rules, it actually says that the secretary and the administrator of the SBA don't think that the recovery will take that long. If another wave hits in the fall and the US is not poised for a full recovery as fast as the current administration would like, this may extend past a 5-year maturity period and may go up to a 10 one. And who knows, Congress may actually change the law altogether again. So another key thing is the deferment period in the application deadline. So now you have until the later of 10 months or December 31st from the end of your covered period to apply for forgiveness. So this is your new deferment period. So I'll walk through some date examples, but basically here's the key difference is that if you submit your application before the end of 10 months from your covered period, you do not need to start making payments until you are notified of the forgiven/forgivable amount from the SBA. If you do not submit the application by the end of the 10 months, you will need to start making payments right away. Let me walk you through an example with dates. Might be a little easier. So on the first column, it's if you submitted your application on time. So you got a disbursement on June 25th. That's the start of your covered period. Your covered period then ends on December 10th. This is going to be when the clock starts ticking for that 10 months, and it'll go till October 10th, 2021. If you have not applied on or before October, if you've applied on or before October 10th, then your payments will start when the SBA gets back to you and says, okay, 100% of your loan is forgiven, no payments due. 90% of your loan is forgiven, 10% payments due over the next however many years. One key thing to note, though, is that your interest starts to accrue on December 10th. This deferment in payment does not change when your interest starts to accrue. So now if we use the same dates and we say that you do not submit your application on or before October 10th, let's say you submitted October 11th, 2021, doesn't matter. You need to start payments on October 10th. That is when the clock is going to start ticking for this loan to become payable in full, no forgiveness. So the spending requirements, those have changed. That changed in the PPP Flexibility Act. The interim final rules displayed that, gave an example, and also talked about whether it was a threshold or proportional system. So now it is 60% payroll and 40% on your other costs. The categories are the same as they were before. It's still rent, utilities, mortgage and lease payments, things like that. For the overhead, salary, state and local taxes, employer healthcare contributions, employer retirement contributions, those still stay the same. They're just increasing the amount that you can spend on the overhead items. So the SBA has determined that this is going to be proportional, not a threshold system. Part of that is because of the FTE safe harbor reduction that they came up with, and that the PPP Flexibility Act really embodied and brought into play. So here's an example of that. So if this was a threshold system, if you received $100,000 in your PPP loan and you spent $54,000 on payroll, $46,000 on overhead, you've not met that 60-40 requirement. You spent 54% and 46%. So with a threshold system, you didn't meet the 60%, nothing's forgiven. The full $100,000 is going to become due as a loan. In a proportional system, they're looking at, okay, what would be, so if you had 54,000, that's 54%. Let's calculate a new amount, and let's say 54% is equal to 60% of this new amount. And that's where we get the 90,000. If you take the 54,000 divided by 0.6, you'll get 90,000. That'll be the forgivable amount. So it's much better. You're going to receive 90,000 forgivable rather than receiving nothing. But it still kind of gives you that kick to make sure you're meeting the 60-40 spending requirements. And last but not least, but as a new covered period, this is probably what matters the most to people. So your new covered period is 24 weeks, and it leads to the conclusion that you have 3 times as long to spend the money, as well as 3 times you can give yourselves 3 times more. And we've been talking a lot about this $15,385 limit that people hit. That's the $100,000 annualized. What that is, that's annualized on an 8-week period. So now that it's a 24-week period, it leads us to the conclusion that you should be able to pay yourselves almost $46,000. You can elect to stick with the 8-week covered period if your loan was made before June 5th. That is a decision that's going to be based off you, your company, your financials, and whether or not you spent the money and are ready to do this. But, if you have any questions on that, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we can talk to you on a more individualized level about it. So now we have some questions.
I'm just going to add to that. So a couple of recommendations from us is that we recommend that you apply for forgiveness as soon as you've spent the money. If new funding comes out and you have an open PPP loan, you will be either eliminated from being able to apply or limited. So if you want to have access to future funding, you may, want to kick the ball a lot earlier than the 24 weeks that's out there. And then the other thing is, a lot of our clients have asked, can I spend all the money on payroll? And yes, you can. And we're actually recommending that you do that because payroll is much easier to send the required documentation to the bank, especially once, the middle of July hits. We'll all have quarterly payroll tax returns that will be significant justification that you've spent that money on payroll, as well as any state taxes that you've paid, versus having to send leases and invoices and canceled checks and, you know, all the other paperwork that's going to need to go with the other items. Okay, so we're ready for questions. We have one here that says, if my PPP gets approved now, do I need to immediately rehire myself, or can I now wait a few weeks since I have through the end of the year to use the funds? This sounds like somebody may be on unemployment, and the purpose of PPP is to take the unemployment option off the table. So as soon as you get approved for PPP, the expectation is you go off of unemployment. You cannot double dip. So I would recommend, if whomever asked that question, if that is, you know, any way related to unemployment benefits, right in the PPP loan docs, it says that, you know, you or any of your staff are not currently collecting unemployment. And if they are, they must come off as soon as possible. How is the amount of self-payment for sole proprietors calculated? You know, Joe went over that. It's still based on the $100,000, and it's, you know, proportionate to your covered period.
And that is also, the 100,000 is the limit. So if you only made 20,000 last year, you cannot give yourself an $80,000 raise. That's one little thing to mention.
Yes, that is true. And PPP funds cannot be used for 1099 contractors. Can a portion of our mortgage or utilities be forgiven if we have a home-based office? Currently, no. It's only a mortgage or utilities that are in the name of the business. Again, you know, this is the guidance we've received. If you really feel that you have a good case, then I would work with your individual lender to see if they will allow those expenses to be included. All right, if we already received PPP, should we apply for another loan if still impacted? Yes, you know, if more money comes out, I would recommend that you do apply for the PPP, just realizing that if you still have a PPP loan outstanding, you won't be able to do that. So be sure you apply for forgiveness right away.
Yeah, so you can't apply for a second PPP loan right now unless you've already finished up your paperwork.
Oh, yes. Unfortunately, we were sort of hoping that when the Flexibility Act came out, that there would be some sort of contingency in there saying that, hey, we realize, you know, you have longer to spend the money, but, you know, the 8 weeks was the limit of what we were allowing you to use, you know, to calculate what you needed. And of course, 8 weeks has come and gone. So many of us are in need of more funding. Some banks, I heard, did allow for some refinancing, if you will, but most did not. So we're able to pay our staff, slated to run a summer program. Yes. So this particular question is, you know, a school year ends June 12th. We were going to have a summer program. That summer program may be canceled. If it's canceled, can those employees go collect unemployment? The answer to that is yes. So long as you are not, you know, in some school settings, the person makes $50,000 and you pay them on a 12-month period. If that's the case, then they would not be eligible for unemployment. But if you pay them, you know, strictly for the school year for 9 months, then I would believe they would be entitled to unemployment.
There may also be a caveat with that. I know public school teachers are not allowed to go on unemployment for the summer, so they would have to look into that on their own. as well.
That's assuming they weren't let go, right?
Yes.
So we're hearing, unfortunately, we're hearing from a lot of teachers and a lot of healthcare workers now that are being let go. So, you know, everybody's looking at their budgets and thinking about the future and making some real tough decisions. You know, these unemployment numbers that they publish don't seem so bad, but you know, what we're hearing is leads me to question how accurate those numbers really are.
And yes, if you received your PPP loan before June 5th, you do not automatically have 5 years to pay the loan back. You can reach out to your lender specifically and ask that they extend to the 5 years, but it's not automatic or guaranteed by the SBA.
So if by running my payroll through July, I've now used up my PPP, is this what you advise to do rather than stick with the 8-week period and adding in overhead costs? You know, that's a good one. Typically, I would say, you know, stick with the 8-week period, but if your bank isn't opening up to process forgiveness applications, then you could be stuck here. And if that's the case, if a couple of more weeks transpires and you know, you could have used all the money with just payroll and not some overhead costs, I believe payroll is going to be the safest and securest way to obtain forgiveness. So a sole prop PPP, can they use their entire, yes. Well, so, good question. So again, they're looking to see what you claimed as income in the previous year. So if the income in the previous year for you, in box 34, if you will, on your Schedule C, was $50,000, then that's your salary for this PPP purposes. You cannot pay yourself more than $50,000. You can't, like Joe was saying, you can't say, okay, well this year, I was going to have a great year until this hit, and I was going to pay myself $100,000, and therefore I'm going to use the PPP money based on a $100,000 salary. We're being told that that will not work.
And what we've seen a few times is that these lenders did not do enough due diligence on their part when they were calculating the loan amount. So they were taking your amount, dividing it by 12, multiplying by 2.5 and calling it a day, whereas they should have been realizing that, oh, it's sole proprietor, they can't be making 20, 30,000 a month. They need to be making at max 15,385 for the 2 months.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, we have found errors in people's loan amounts, and you know, a good percentage of our clients gave the money back because banks didn't do the proper due diligence. A lot of our clients included, because very early on, it was questionable whether it was going to include 1099s or not. And so some people submitted their application including their 1099s, but labeling them as employees because they really didn't understand the difference. And the bank gave them the money based on their 1099s. So, you know, we were shocked to see that, but it was a good chunk of change, and you know, it did happen. So I would pay attention. I can't stress enough that the most important person or entity during this process for you is going to be your bank. They have given the banks a lot of leeway in deciding on what they ask for, what questions they ask for, and what will be forgiven. A few of the things yesterday that came up, you know, someone said that, you know, we heard that anybody who has a PPP loan less than $150,000 will automatically be forgiven. None of our representatives said that that was true. The other, you know, rumor that's floating out there is that if my loan is less than $200,000, I will not be audited. That again is not true. What the the guidance says is if your loan is more than $200,000, there's a high likelihood that you will be audited. And if it's less than, then you're less likely. But that does not mean that you will not be audited. And there is some pushback on the banks now to give them some responsibility in determining the facts based around this money. There was a tremendous amount of funding given out to those who didn't need it. And I don't want to say that, you know, you were a business, you know, and you got money, but it turned out you didn't really need the money. Okay, that's not what that's about. You know, back 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, none of us knew. There was an extreme amount of uncertainty, and none of us knew what was going to happen. So the first round of PPP funding did not have a necessity as a strict requirement. So it isn't based on need. There was none of that in the formula. The next round of funding is going to be based on need, from what we understand. All right, looks like we don't have any more questions. Looks like a small group today. Again, we thank you all for attending. If there's anything we can do to improve or you know, make these more informative or helpful, let us know. As soon as the application comes out for forgiveness, we will be providing guidance, and we will help any and all of our clients get through this process as best as we can. So please reach out. We do want to be a resource for you and help guide you during these difficult times. So have a great weekend, and we'll chat soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.